After getting the lid off this master cylinder, the job now is to see whether I can make it work. I found some old alkaline degreaser in the shed and gave this body a wash in the ultrasonic cleaner. I scratched a lot of crusty stuff out of it with a dental style pick. I used about a cupful of this stuff in 10 litres of water. The piston was moving freely, so I didn't bother trying to release it. I got most of the crusty stuff out of this reservoir. I've sprayed a bit of brake clean in there, and I've sprayed a bit of brake clean in through the outlet there. Not knowing really how to proceed. I've been told that that rubber valve in the bottom there will pop out. Been levering on it a little bit. I'm concerned I'll damage it. Blown compressed air in through the top and it's blown a bit of crap out of the valve. The actual lever works. The cylinder is moving and the spring's returning. I am at this stage going to try. I'm concerned that the brake clean may dry things out too much, so I'm going to put some brake fluid in this reservoir and put the lid on so it doesn't spill from there. Then play around with the lever to see whether I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I'm going to see, whether it's just going to run out the outlet a bit or not. I may go and mount the lever on the bike and connect the hose to it and see whether, once it's set up like that, I can take the reservoir top off again, see if I can pump any fluid and lower the level. Not sure what to expect. So I've mounted the master cylinder brake lever up on the handlebar there, and I filled the reservoir up. With the reservoir full, it wasn't wanting to run out of the exit port here, so I was able to mount it, and I've just screwed that hose on. The hose and the whole line and the brake wheel cylinders are empty with no fluid in them. Now I'm not sure whether this is going to pump. I think I've currently got the bleeder valves off, so there's air in the line, trapped in the line at the moment. I'm going to pump this a couple of times, take the lid off and see whether there's been any lowering of the level, and there may or may not be. We'll then release one of the bleeders on the front wheels and pump a bit more and see whether fluid will run down to the brakes, or whether it sort of needs some back pressure to help with the pumping. I'm not sure. It's a journey of discovery for me as well. I did have this level filled up to the line at the top there. It's down maybe 5 millimeters from there. I've got that reservoir sitting fairly horizontal. You see the liquid line is parallel to that fill line. And so some of the fluid has dropped out of this reservoir since I started pumping. Doesn't appear to be lowering any more at the moment, but as I said, the bleeders are in tight at the moment. I'm going to release this right hand front bleeder and pump some more. I'm conducting a bit of a science experiment here. I've got a plastic tube going down to the bleeder on this right end. When I pump, there is no lowering of the level of the fluid up the top here. It's interesting, if I blow in the tube, I get air bubbles coming up into the reservoir there, which makes me think if I had a source of fluid that I could suck or blow reverse through the line. It would evacuate the line of air and eventually get fluid up to the reservoir without any air in it. Over a coffee break, I found this on eBay and bought one. I then had another idea. I've got this bleeder undone, spanner on there is ready to tighten it up when I need to. There's a short bit of tube there, a joiner, longer bit of tube, another joiner, and then a longer bit of tube up to the top there, which I have been sucking and blowing on. What I've done is I disconnected the hose at this joiner, dipped the end of the hose in my brake fluid bottle and sucked brake fluid from there almost up to the top there. So I wasn't trying to drink it. So I had a tube full of brake fluid. I then plugged it back into here, opened the nipple. I had sort of that much head of brake fluid in the tube there. Initially I was getting some air bubbles come out of the wheel cylinder here into the tube and slowly find their way up the tube. When they tended to stop, you see the levels there at the moment, I tried to blow some of that fluid into the system, just blowing on this end pipe. With quite a fair amount of resistance, I was using all of my pressure to move this level. I'd only moved that level down a couple of inches and it wanted to spring back, but it seemed to dislodge more bubbles from the wheel cylinder end there, and eventually this level lowered, and I was also seeing some bubbles of air come up in the reservoir on the other side there. Now I've done that on both bleeders now, so there's really I've only used one long straw worth of brake fluid. I got all of it into the other side because there was nothing at all in the system when I did the other side. On this side, I'm struggling to lower that level. I'm also finding now that if I pump the brake lever, you see this level raise and lower. Was also dislodging more air at the bottom there, and the air would float to the surface. In the tube there, you'd see this level lower because the air was being displaced in the system. The actual reservoir at the top there hasn't gained any fluid at this stage. I think what's going to be occurring, I think I've experienced this in the past, where master cylinder sort of needs some back pressure of fluid in the tube to effectively pump. Otherwise it's just compressing air the whole time. It doesn't seem to open and close valves. I've sort of got a reverse bleeding mechanism going here. My fluid level in this hose is there at the moment, and I've got the bleeder shut off. If I go and pump the lever at the moment, I will get bubbles coming in the reservoir because there's bubbles there, see? Because I pressurised that hose before I shut it off, just by blowing into the hose, lowering that level in the hose by about 2 inches. And now that's stopped bubbling. I'll stop pumping it and I'll come back here. You'll see my level there is about 1 inch away from the connector, or I've been in a habit of saying one banana. So anyway, I'll see if I can get it to I can't, if I blow into that at the moment, it won't lower that because the valves, I'll see if I can do it holding the phone. So I can lower it that much by just blowing in there. It pops back up again, but if I shut the nipple off, if I get it down, you know, I don't think I got it 2 inches that time, but if I got it down as far as I can with all my breath and then shut the nipple off, it will stay down. And then if I go and pump the throttle, pump the brake handle, the air that I've expelled will bubble out the top. So in the process, I'm forcing fluid into the system from the bottom. That's why I'm calling it a reverse bleed mechanism. I'll stop the video, blow that down, and start again. My full breath pressure has moved, that was at about 1 banana. It's a bit over 2 bananas now from the joint because the bleeder's off. Now if I go and pump the handbrake lever, it'll release, you know, a little bit of air out the top, and then if I open this up again, that level over there won't change, and I can start the procedure again and get another banana in there. My reverse bleeding procedure ended up working out for me. You saw me blowing in that big long tube, trying to blow the level of the fluid down and therefore into the bleeder and back up inside the brake circuit. But I hadn't made any significant change or any height change to the liquid in the reservoir. There was only bubbles coming out of there, and that was getting harder and harder to see bubbles, and yet the brake lever itself was still flopping in the wind pretty much. There was obviously still air in the system. I thought I'd try, rather than me trying to puff on on my long straw, I thought I'd fire a bit of compressed air into the tube, and that certainly pushed the fluid level along in the tube. You know, by gently playing that into the end of the tube, I could push the fluid another, say, 4 inches of level would drop in the tube, and that fluid was going into the system, and then you'd work the lever at the top a bit more. And then eventually I started to hear the adjusters in the wheels clicking, which means the wheel cylinders are pushing the pads out, and when the pads come out, the automatic adjusters take up the slack, and so the wheel cylinders were starting to operate. Then I was finding, well, this wheel's still stiff. You'd think too stiff, but used a fair bit of pressure to roll that around there. You know, if I was operating the lever at the top, it now brakes. I used the compressed air a couple of times, and the lever got stiffer and stiffer, and now no longer bottoms out because the brake calipers are extending out and braking the wheel. At that point I figured, well, at most it would need now is a standard sort of bleed. It appears that the brakes are working at the moment, so I topped the reservoir up to the full level, put the lid on and my nice new screws, and it is now done. Well, I don't know whether I'm wasting my time. It's pretty messy inside that. The last thing I had to do with the brake master cylinder was straighten the lever. It was drooping down about an inch. I took it over to the vise and gently straighten it. It still droops a bit. How far do you go before you risk fracturing it? I've got a vacuum brake bleeding kit arriving next week that I don't really need now. Hey, I've finished the day with a working master cylinder. There's got to be some fun to be had in your shed.